This is Full Coffers with your host, Phil and Toni Buggs from Abundant Harvest Christian Fellowship Ministries.
And this week on Full Coffers, The Journey, Part 21. Well, welcome back again.
Again, we are happy to be here.
Definitely. So we're going to get right into it. And for those who were here with us on our last podcast, you remember that I am calling the next several years in our journey the wilderness years. Why? I don't know. It sounds good. But anyway, we last left off.
It was Laura Ingalls.
Yeah, Laura.
And
Little House on the
Little
Prairie.
House on the Prairie.
Yeah, life wasn't no prairie, though. But anyway, we left off with our son, Philip. He gave us a call and did one of those Dear Brother Noomsies.
I have messed up. I mean, I have royally, I thought I had it together and things happened and I need help.
Yes. So from a Denny's restaurant, he calls us and he says, well, I no longer have a job.
No job.
I no longer have a place to stay.
No place to stay.
And I'd like to come back.
Is that safety net still there?
You know, it's one of those things where you kind of look at your kids. They make mistakes, yes. And, was I happy about the situation? No, because I have a memory. And I remember when he marched in there 2 months prior talking about what he ain't going to do. And I wasn't happy then. And for us to say, okay, come on back.
No. For us to say, okay, come on back. God did a Jedi mind trick on us.
Yeah, he did. Because left up to my own devices, you better get a job at Denny's.
Yeah, ours as well. I mean, we go back and we say, well, we're going to raise our kids in 18. We're going to do everything that gets them right. And 18, we'll send them off. And
somebody lied. Yeah, I bought it into it too. But they lied.
We did. And honestly, that is what we set out to do. I mean, it worked for Toni and myself. I mean, we were married at 18 and 21.
Yeah.
But like God didn't make robots. We aren't cookie cuttered. Life's experiences, even in the believer's life, is full of so much diversity and individuality. But yet, God is able to keep everything in check, in focus, and despite the fact that we have plans, God knows ultimately what's best. So he allowed Toni and I to keep our pipe dream of we're just going to raise our kids and we're going to do everything. And then all of it, they're just going to fly.
And you bring up a good point because, God does not make robots. And I can recall a conversation that you had when we were still living in Michigan years ago, and our kids were small back then. And the deacon was telling about,
His
raising
son.
kids because, he had an older son, and Philip and I were still young. And Philip was in the conversation. I wasn't there. Yeah. But he went on to tell the men that was in the group, and Philip was in there, about, raising older children and things like that. And Philip had a little bit of a comment about that.
I did because I was so in my I know I'm right. I
Pious,
know I got this
zealot.
I got and okay, uncle. I was in my not my naivety of Christianity, let alone believers. My thoughts was that, well, I believe in that scripture. You train up a child in the way they should go, and when they're old, they won't depart. Obviously,
it's true.
Deacon, I said, obviously, Deacon, you must not have done something right. And honestly, that is where I was at. And I loved the demeanor of that deacon because he didn't cut me to shreds. He said, keep living.
Keep living.
Keep living. And that stuck in my mind while I was sure that he must have done something wrong. Sure enough, that 6-letter word called choice will completely turn a parent's world upside down despite their best intentions. And I think that was part of, and I shouldn't say part of the maturity, that's the ongoing maturity in a believer's life who's really following, is that they recognize you can do everything that God instructs you to do. And you're good with that. But it doesn't turn out the way you think it should according to if I say the vantage point from which you see life. And so as our children are defying everything that we set out as in terms of what we thought was a course set for their life, God was fully aware of it. And even as we are being blindsided left and right, it didn't catch God off guard at at any point. And in fact, as we mentioned earlier about how Toni got out of her job in paralegal world and entering into the job that she is now, we'll start to see how that starts to unfold in God's ultimate plan. So, but with all of that, just the naivety of my young, dare I say, stupid. I can say that now. I can talk about me now, but
Well,
I
heck,
do
we're
see
both over 60, so we can say anything we want to say now.
we did some dumb things. It's just our
But
beliefs.
yeah,
But we grew, and that's part of the journey as a believer, part of a journey in human experience as well. So we now go back into Philip coming back and needing that safety net, and God instructs us, lay it out, take them in.
give him a do-over.
Yep, that's it.
And that's what
Yep,
we did. So
yep.
he came home December of '04.
Right.
And of course, there's certain, parameters that we set out. You
Yep.
know, you got to go to school, get a job. And he decided he didn't want to go to school.
Right.
He decided that, no, I just want to start working.
And we're good with that.
I was good with that.
Yeah.
And so he went out there and he found a job working at one of the major tire chains
Yep.
out here in Arizona. And he started working. And, in '05, he was only making like $6 and some change, not a whole lot. But,
enough to get him out of our house.
well, yeah, eventually. So, he stayed with us for a number of months.
Yep.
And he was able to save enough to look at the fact of going out there and getting his own place.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was doing well. He was redirected. He got serious. And let's face it, folks, they were living in our home. Do you really think they're going to do anything outside of, what we would expect living in our home? Now, putting a pause in that, going back to our daughter, Kyle, our children have a way of doing this tag team thing. They have done it all their lives. So
I'm kind of glad, looking back at it, I'm glad they tag team and didn't just compound us together,
So, Kyle, at this point in time, she had graduated from the conservatory in January of 2005.
Yep.
She was now working full-time
Right.
at the part-time job she had. She's taken on full-time. And then that March, she decided, I've worked really hard and rightfully so. So she decided in March of '05 she wanted to take a vacation to go back to Nashville to celebrate her birthday.
2 months.
Yeah. Mm-hmm, yeah.
And you said that just wrote it off your tongue so smoothly. Most jobs, you don't even think about vacations until when? A year.
At least a year.
Yeah. At least you don't start accruing enough time to take off. Hint, 2 months. Kyle needs, here it is,
A break.
she needs a break. 2 months.
So she takes a vacation in March of '05.
2 months.
A whole week. And,
7 days. 2 months. I mean, I'm really trying to get the math behind this. And here Toni and I have worked continuously for years. And truthfully, we have been married. Oh, geez. Anyway, the point and I'm sure all of you can relate to, is the fact that most times we get vacations after we've put in a good amount of time.
And honestly, being po folk, you may get a week off, but you stay at home all week because you can't afford to go anywhere.
So anyway,
she takes
2
this
months.
vacation. She goes to Nashville. She does her thing or whatever. And then she comes home and she goes back to work. But we discover that in May of '05, she's terminated.
Yes.
And the reason given for the termination is
Yes.
absenteeism. Yeah.
Go figure that. Wow. Of all the things, it wasn't her work performance. It was the fact that she didn't show up
She didn't go to
for
work.
work. She didn't go to
You know,
work.
so she had just gotten her place, and
Just gotten her place.
and now she's jobless with a place. And so she lets us know what's going on, and now we're like, oh man, what is going on here? And it was one of those things where we just kind of let her figure it out. We just said, okay. At that time we did not feel the unction to say, come back home.
Again, God is not telling us put that safety net out there. He says, no, let me take care of her. And that's if I say the beauty part of how God strengthens all of our individual relationships, is that sometimes he, if I say forces us, I really don't like use that terminology, but he allows us to make decisions that will ultimately, if we're his children, will lead us back to him. And so in Kyle's particular incident, and we've always shared with our children that you need to establish a relationship with God. And when we were saying, well, Kyle, you're going to have to figure this out. And then her mother would say, you got to figure this out. Eventually, I hope Kyle would say, well, God, you got any ideas?
Because to be perfectly honest, Toni was having flashbacks when she was a senior in high school, and she left with this. Anyway, go to podcast, whatever number, and you can figure it out. So I'm having flashbacks. I was triggered.
I'm sure most parents out there, they're laughing as well with it because they have their own version of the story we're talking about, where we have to decide, do we come to their rescue or do we let them scrape their knees? And as believers, we do know that God knows best, regardless of what that is. And we have to trust and allow God to do what only God can do. And he tells us, sleep good at night because I got this. Now, if you're going to sit up here and worry after I told you what to do, that's on you. But I'm telling you, in this case, I got Kyle.
Yeah.
And
now,
I'm
not going to say that I was, all calm and everything. I'll be honest.
Lie to us.
It was
please.
disturbing. It was, it was disturbing because it seems like sometimes you're on this nice, smooth road, and life is just kind of going along, and then all of a sudden you hear these thuds and bumps and. It's like, here we go again.
There you go.
Here we go again.
Yeah.
And so, you kind of go through the process of why is this happening? What's going on? But like Philip said, you have to just kind of give it to God. And it's easier said than done.
And that's so
easier
true.
said than done.
So true. So true. Yep.
But that's what we had to do.
Yep.
And eventually she did work through it. She worked through it and she was able to get another apartment, another job. It wasn't as nice as the one before, but she did it. So she was living in wasn't the greatest atmosphere to live in, but she could only get what she can get. And so she moved in and she was starting to kind of get back on track.
Agreed. I'm going to jump in and jump out real quick with that, is that part of the learning experience is that when you make decisions that causes you to lose what God has initially blessed you with, if I say there has to be consequences, and I believe in this particular case, God did provide for Kyle, but not at the level in which she was initially. Because sometimes if you choose to do things that are against his will, and he gives you exactly the same thing again,
then why would you
follow?
Have you learned? Why would you be obedient?
Yeah. What lessons have you learned? I can mess up and get the same thing. That isn't the way God works. And I am bold. I am confident enough to say, without saying I know everything that God will do, I do understand, though, that there are consequences. He loves us, but there are consequences that causes us to learn the lessons. So if there is no lessons learned by having something different come out, then God isn't doing his part, which we know he always does. So, take that for what that is. Yep.
Now we're going to take another U-turn.
Here's a
U-turn.
U-turn.
We're going to go back to Philip.
Here we go.
Now, Philip was doing good on his job. And he discovered working at this tire shop that he is very good with the gift of gab. And actually, he was like that even before.
It's not gift of gab. It's salesman.
Okay, call it what you want. Anyway, so he had started doing some, selling. Not only was he working and doing oil lubes, what do you call it, lube jobs and all this other stuff? I don't know.
Oh, now she gets words all tangled up now. It's oil and lube, dear.
Yeah.
So actually, he started off, I say like this, checking tire pressures, to then to changing oil, to doing other things. And he noticed that as he was talking to customers, they would ask him things and he would be able to give them solid information. And I think the Philip's managers started to recognize, hey, Philip has a way with people. He's able to get information to them. And so from those things, they started to recognize Philip has some skills with customers. And so they started to put him in the front office to make recommendations to customers. If I'm not getting too far ahead of myself, but the trade is that he started to excel in the oil and lube or in the tire shops.
Right, to the point where they actually transferred him to another store.
Yep.
That had a higher clientele.
Exactly. Yep.
And so he wasn't under the cars anymore. He was actually the technician that would advise you on what type of tires you would need to get. So he was actually doing very well.
Yes.
And we were just proud of him. He would make a base pay, and after that he'd make commission.
And he was doing good with the commissions
He was doing really good.
Yeah.
Until
Here it comes.
Hello. We get a phone call from our son.
Yep.
To let us know that he was fired from his job.
Fired.
Now, of course, as he's going along and getting promotions and doing well, you're wondering, why on earth would they fire you?
I mean, he's going to work, unlike his sister. So
why?
Yeah.
And then, because he didn't have a job, he had to move out of his place.
Here we go.
And so we're at the point where with Kyle, it's like we weren't inviting him to come back. He already had a do-over. So what did you do to get fired?
Yeah.
Well, the shocker of it all was the commissions that Philip was making, and even then some, was going up his nose.
Yep.
In the form of cocaine.
Yep. Talk about crystal staircases and rosy red glasses being shattered, thrown up the wall. Toni and I, our world, again, is getting rocked. Trust me now. The things we're sharing, I know that parents out there have gone through this, are going through this, suspect that they may be entering into this realm. But sharing from two people whose this world we had no clue about. We are thrown headfirst into this turbulent storm that we hear lots of news about the epidemics and drugs, and now we're in the mix with our own children.
So we're in this boat feeling like we don't have a paddle, no navigation system.
No.
Not knowing how to get through this, and our son is telling us now it's not weed anymore. No. We're talking hardcore. We're talking drugs.
Yeah.
And so he talked to his sister, Kyle, and he ended up kind of staying with her on and off, but because of his erratic behavior, his drug use, sometimes she would have to tell him to get out.
Yep.
And to put matters on top of matters, when our daughter moved over into the area, she befriended a young man that was somewhat violent with her.
Somewhat.
Okay. Yeah. Let's just say, call it what it is. He may not have hit her, but he pushed her to the point where she was threatened and felt scared from his behavior. We found this out through our son, who called us at night, who was there and said, Kyle told me that this young man pushed her and she is in the bathroom because she's afraid. So at this point,
I done busted. I'm trying to find a phone booth because I'm grabbing my cape, and
I've got the bat,
yeah, and we're about to do some damage.
We getting ready to go do.
Yep.
So we get to her apartment.
Yep.
He's gone, of course, and I'm like, get him on the phone. And she was reluctant to do it because at this point, all bets are off. Get him on the phone. He gets on the phone. It's not him that's on the phone, but his friend. And he talking all kind of yang to me. And I just told him, bring it. I'm right here. I'm waiting for you.
No, I mean, Tony's there. As she is recalling this incident, she's already back there. We have to put some, if I say levity, it really isn't, because we're talking about drugs, we're talking about violence that oftentimes is accompanied with it. We're talking about domestic violence, we're talking about relationships, and these things are happening at that time in real time
in
to
a
believers.
Fast pace.
To believers. How do you navigate that? Do scriptures like, well, we turn the other cheek and we're supposed to forget? Yes, that has its place. But in this instance, when that is her parents, reacted to that situation, read scripture. When Abraham found out that his nephew Lot had been taken by the people in that country, Abraham didn't say, well, we'll just pray for that situation. Abraham got his boys and he went after it. Mm-hmm. I am here to share that Christians, believers, I do try to delineate that. Believers are not wusses. We share, we're believers. We are gracious, but we also are not pushovers. And I share that from this vein that God is still, if I say, in full control, but he gives us the tools needed to handle situation. Truth be told,
a Louisville Slugger is what I had, okay?
Truth be told, there are some things that God prepares certain believers with to handle people who don't understand how to ration things out. I'm coming out of that because we want to make sure that we leave the audience things that will help them. But we share this in terms of our own personal experiences because we were not just going to allow harm to happen to our kids. Believer, unbeliever, that would be any response from a loving parent. So we acted like any loving parent would do, which I truly believe is what God would do in protecting his own. So we're not acting outside of the realm of what God ordains in terms of what's right and what's wrong. So I want to put that in context as Toni now is back in 2023. She's not back there. I have to sometimes
I went there.
Yeah, girlfriend did. I know we're audio, but I had whoa, slow down. It's okay. But anyway,
when like you said, when you see your kids being harmed and experiencing things like that as a child, all kind of things came back. But I can say the guy never came back.
No,
okay?
No.
And so we are dealing with our daughter who is dealing with relationships that are not healthy for her. We're dealing with a son who has told us, I'm an addict. And we thought we weren't prepared for it, but apparently God knew we would be prepared for it, but it didn't hurt just the same.
No, it didn't hurt any less if I share it like that. And now we'll come back to why did God open the door for Toni to learn or to start to learn about drug abuse, domestic violence, because she had experienced a little bit of that in Nashville, if I'm not mistaken. But coming to bear, God had already started to work in our home to give us the tools that we would need to nurture and to see after our children who would be would be experiencing these things, drugs, domestic violence. So God prepared Toni as she is now flourishing at the job she's at right now. She gets to see, she can see things. So she is able now to help our son.
And so with all of this going on, and I'm going to Philip's going to end us out. There are some things internally going on with him.
Yeah, I do. And I know we've got a few minutes here, so I'm just going to start this this portion here. In everything that we're sharing right now, you all know that I was called to the ministry and some time back, and I had been working you know how Christianity bleeds in me in a very real sense. But I had come out here to Phoenix because I say God had something for me to do, and in my missionary Baptist mindset, I'm sure God's going to call me to a church and those types of things. And I was, if I say, just being obedient wherever He sent me. But something started to become uncomfortable to me. And the uncomfortableness that I felt was that of routine, mundane, redundant church life. And I have to be real and honest, not that I have not been, but in my own life, I started to see a pattern that I almost was robotic in how I was living this life of this faith walk. Every Sunday, I would get up and prepare, put my suit or whatever it was for the climate out here, and I would worship. And on Wednesdays, I'd have Bible study, and I just got, if I say, a routine, and it's like everything else. There was nothing else. Like my Christian life evolved around Bible study, men's meeting, worship, Sunday school. And it was methodical like that. And after a while, I started to ask God, I says, is this it to Christianity? I was becoming bored with what I was doing in my Christian life. And God heard my prayer. He heard my cry. And one Saturday, I was preparing for Sunday, ironing my shirt for my suit, and God said, you're not going to church tomorrow. And I said, okay, I'm not. He says, what do you want me to do? He says, I want you to go, and he told me a grocery store to go to. I want you to get water, and I want you to get bananas. Now, I'm not sure what he has planned, but I do. I got enough water. It's hot in Arizona at this time. And so I put in ice. I freeze it overnight. So I want you to go downtown, and I want you to pass these out to the homeless. Now, truthfully, the water I could understand, but I didn't understand the bananas until Toni told me later on. It's because of the potassium, and it keeps people from coming dehydrated. And so I did. And that Sunday, about 6 in the morning, I started. And by 9 o'clock, I was done. And God started to open my eyes on what He wanted me to do. He says there are people who attend church on Sundays, and that's fine. That's where I want them. But with you, you're the ground I'm calling you to serve is for those who have no idea of who I am. I need you to go, and I need you to serve them. And so that's what I did. For 3 months, I would get up and I would do that. This is what started, if I say a paradigm shift, or if I say it like this, God gave me a ministry disruption. He disrupted my ministry, and He changed my trajectory of what I was going to be doing as a man of God, as a minister, ordained minister of the gospel, that my ministry was not going to be in, if I say, the four physical walls of the church. My ministry was going to what, and if I say my ministry, the ministry God had set for me is to go and share His word with folk who don't have no idea of what that organized church life is like. And He had already prepared me to be a vessel, to be used like that. So as we draw down on this episode, as we pick up the next one, you'll start to see, at least in my spiritual disruption, a change in which God has caused in my life, coupled with Toni and I as parents raising adult kids and navigating through drug abuse, navigating through domestic violence, navigating through rebellion, navigating through just not sure of what the next step to take. So as we end this out,
Tie another knot and hold on, because it's going to be a bumpy ride.
Have a great rest of your day and week to come. This episode was produced and edited by Miss K. Simone. Cover graphics by Indefinite. Music by Miss K. Simone. So until next time, I'm Phil Bugs.
And I'm Toni Bugs.
Wishing you a wonderful week.